Trump is talking to C-SPAN? Where?
Well, thank you very much. This is a very sad day for America. And it was also very sad driving through Washington, D.C. and seeing the filth and the...
America's crying.
And all of the broken buildings and walls and the graffiti. This is not the place that I left. It's a very sad thing to see it. When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America. This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary. And
he's right, and he should say it.
By a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him. We can't let this happen in America. Thank you very much.
Do you want these trials to happen before the 2024 election?
All right, there you have it.
Well, thank you very much. This is a very sad day for America.
All right, let's get to what Fox News is saying.
Judges are poisoned. I mean, how can, like, if you're a judge or you're a jury and you've been for 5 years, and I said this on the 5, I think 2 years ago, I said, if everybody's saying that this guy's Hitler, there's got to be something wrong with you if you don't rig the election. There's got to be something wrong with you if you aren't biased. If you're on a jury and Hitler's there, of course, you don't care if he's innocent of this particular thing. That dude's Hitler. You got to get rid of him. And I think that, you know, for 5 years, this guy has been Hitler. There's no way.
Dude, what is happening with the captions today?
I think, to your other point, you can know that you lost an election, but still think it was crooked.
But if you act to try to undo the election, is all I'm saying. If I call people and said, let's find some more votes here, because I know we won, and if you, that's the only point I was making.
Let's ask our legal eagle.
Okay,
She's here.
There were a lot of cases that were never heard on the merits. I mean, they were tossed on early motions, other technicalities. So a lot of these cases didn't get to the merits. Some of them did. But I think that the president's legal team, meaning President Trump, felt like a lot of these things were unresolved. Their efforts to get things done at the Supreme Court, got to get at least 4 justices to
it's their legal eagle, not our legal eagle.
So they feel like there were a lot of, angles
That's
and lanes that were
normal
left to them. But I think it's interesting that it seems that Democrats are getting more and more concerned about what they've pushed for, which I think is to make Trump the nominee because they think he's going to be the easiest one to beat. Now when they see him surging and him joking on social media about, I just need that 4th indictment, it's going to ensure my reelection, they're getting nervous. In Playbook, I think it was today, there was a...
Yeah, it's the liberals that are getting nervous. More so, liberals are just fatigued by all of this. And not only that, but also... Like, I don't think people care about it as much. I mean, even Trump supporters don't care about it. Like, look at these arraignments, one after the other. Like, there's not that much momentum at all. For the same exact reasons I mentioned time and time again.
We're taking this seriously.
Can I ask you one thing, though, about this question?
I agree. Trump is a more serious candidate.
For Jack Smith, wouldn't he have put all that he had into this indictment with the court of public opinion being, like, this unprecedented? Would he actually hold back all of these other, like, supposedly great nuggets and evidence to then present at trial? He would hold it back?
It's possible that not everything is in the indictment. That's clear. It could be hundreds of pages long then. But think about former Attorney General Bill Barr in an interview last night said he is convinced that there is a lot more that Jack Smith has that he hasn't put out there. Remember when former Vice President Pence was forced to testify to one of these grand juries? We saw the transcript. There were 18 consecutive pages at one point blacked out. So there are a lot of questions about what else did Pence have to say? What else don't we know that's been held behind closed doors and for the grand jury to this point? And again, what you present to a grand jury and how you do this at trial, very different. There's no one defending the defendant at the grand jury hearing.
No suit? I was wearing a suit earlier. It's too hot, my man.
You guys want to see some Democrats losing their minds?
Sure.
We have
Harold votes no.
Just walk
Let's
outside.
play it.
I love America.
Oh, I love that. They're like doing lip watch.
He makes a deal with Smith.
Without jail time?
And without jail. He says, look, I'm going away. I'm moving to Saudi Arabia. I just want him to go away and stop ruining my country.
There are certain prosecutors that would offer him a plea agreement without time if he would agree to never run for public office again anywhere.
Democracy itself is really at issue in this trial. If Trump could...
Look how hard the libs are owned. Is like the only thing they have at this point. Because like, what the fuck are they gonna do? They can't argue on the boundaries of the cases. Like he's dead to rights in many of them. So
about whether people in this country care about the facts and the law.
It would be, Wolf, the end of our democracy if Donald Trump was able to get back into office.
Jesse Waters, that was just a sampling of the reaction.
To be fair, I don't even think that's like that wrong of a statement to say like it would be the end of our democracy as we know it, because it's like, yeah, for him to go to jail and then win election and then pardon himself would dramatically undermine all of the institutions that have been built to ensure that that doesn't happen. So, I mean, you know, there have been plenty of instances where political leaders have, you know, gone to prison and then came back and were worse than before. And no, I'm not talking about Nelson Mandela. I'm talking about motherfucking Adolf Hitler. You know what I mean?
Might not be the nominee. And I want to bring up what you said about Barr. Some really smart lawyer earlier on Fox said that if they're going to bring in Barr as a witness, they get to cross Barr and say, okay, well, you told Trump there was no election fraud. What'd you do to investigate it? How many man hours did you spend? How much money did you spend? Where did you go?
That's so crazy.
What did those lieutenants tell you? I mean, you can't say everything's fine. It was like 2 weeks he checked for fraud. Okay? Everybody has the right to be suspicious in this country. If you have a COVID election where they blow out all of the signature requirements, they blow out all of the deadlines, and then they blast out all these unsolicited ballots into the ecosystem with no chain of custody, you're not suspicious. You have a right to be suspicious. And all these state legislators had no power to do anything about it. It was just done via judicial fiat. And then Zuckerberg lands, I think it was $500 million, layers over all of these election volunteers, all over the state worker act. These people were activists that were running this thing. So if someone sends you an affidavit that says there's monkey business in Detroit, the president has every legal right to call the...
I like this idea that, like, these are legitimate claims, especially because they were brought up to court and investigated numerous times to no avail. And so you can't keep consistently claiming that this happened, there was monkey business, when, like, you tried it, it failed numerous fucking times, multiple investigations were conducted. I love people being like, dude, will you talk about Lizzo? Yes, I will talk about Lizzo, but I honestly don't give a shit about Lizzo as much as I care about what's going on here. And no, guys, him saying monkey business is not because he's like being anti-black, okay? He's anti-black all the time. This is not one of those circumstances. Calm down.
60 in Hawaii. You're not Jesse Waters. Take off that mask.
How long had that been a state?
I'm researching too much.
President Trump's, as you can see, the plane, they're lining up on the tarmac, and he is about to depart back to New Jersey.
Can I make a point? I hate to do this because going to The View for political insight.
No, he
like
doesn't.
McDonald's.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't hate to do this.
They said something that was true, and that is, it's not about an election or a crime. It's about taking him off the board.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
they just want him to go away.
They just want him to go away, and it's like they're playing a team in which he's the best player that they got. Sorry, Republicans, but where are the others? And so they just want to take him off. So they just actually told the truth that they're willing to do anything to get rid of him because they can't play fair.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And that's, you can't do that. As an American, we know the Constitution requires a couple things to run for president. And it's not to be approved by the View. You have to be a certain age.
Yeah.
That's a great name.
In America, you have to be an American citizen. Democrats or anyone who wish something like that in their political opponent is just, that's un-American. You have to beat someone at the ballot.
The other thing is that I've been noticing.
At the ballot box.
Let me just ask you about this, Greg, is that the Democrats are constantly so disappointed and disgusted with Republicans because they keep saying, like, if you listen to NPR, for example, they'll say they just cannot believe that Republicans would stick with them even after all these indictments, like even after all of these legal problems, and they stick with them and they cannot figure it out.
That's a terrible impression of NPR. It has to be more like this. I can't believe.
I'll give it a try next time. Although I listen at 1.5 speed to get it over with faster.
Why are Republicans still sticking to the person that we can't stand? We hate him so much. Why don't they hate him too? It's because you hate him so much that they love him. Because he scares you because they support him. That's the whole thing. So the more you throw this stuff at him, again, like I said yesterday, it's spinach to Popeye. You know, the more indictments, the impeachments. By the way,
he's not wrong about this.
Weird right now. The first impeachment, the perfect phone call, when it turns out he was dead, right? Yeah. Think about that.
Yeah. Shannon Bream, what is the next step in the legal process? Will his team make a motion to what?
He's not wrong. A big part of why people absolutely love Donald Trump is because Donald Trump gets the libs mad. They get the libs horny and they get the libs mad. So Donald Trump is who he is because of his enemies, right? I mean, I talked about this extensively yesterday with like not enough good characters on the liberal side. Kind of hurts Donald Trump But overall, this kind of like liberals are coming after me because, they're coming after me because they want to come after you. I'm just in the way. That narrative is absolutely demonstrably successful. We're going to be looking at polls in a little bit because finally it's polling season, my favorite. Him saying that they love Trump because Dems hate him is saying no matter what the argument is, if Dems are in favor of it, Republicans will take the other side automatically. Yes. Yeah. That is a more honest interpretation of modern American politics than anything else that you can arrive at. But yeah. Yeah, they're reactionary. This is how it works. But that's basically it. It's all team sports. Yeah, pretty much. I think that is a very sound analysis on how this works.
The day you
check my logs, it's actually insane. I promise. What is this? They're torturing people in Tennessee. Hassan, please watch the Danny Burks video on McCamey Manor. Check my logs. Okay, brother, maybe later. Okay, I'm sorry, but in the midst of like a fucking Trump arrest,
discussions that occur.
I'm most likely not going to cover that
that
at
the
this
judge
moment.
is looking out for, and that prosecutors are looking out for, so that it'd be one thing if you and I were debating and you were a witness against me in a criminal case. We could have that discussion. It's out in the open. But if I tried to pressure you in private afterwards, that would be a potential problem. And I think that's what the judge was really keying in on there. So a number of things to keep an eye on this case. Bottom line is within the next 7 days, we'll know when prosecutors want to move forward. And then by the end of the month, I think we'll have a pretty good idea as to when this case might go to trial.
For me, the only manner where torture is happening is for me to care about that is like if Trump Manor and Trump house arrest is actually somehow legally allowed to torture Donald Trump or something right now. It's a YouTuber asking people to get big creators to cover the story. Ignore. No, I mean, I'll look at it. I'll look at it, but not right now.
You, friend.
Sorry.
That's okay.
We got Chuck Rosenberg, and I've been, we've got the two Chucks.
I hear you, man. I got you. I'm coming to you, Chuck Todd, on this issue of, key takeaways from what we've seen over the course of the last, 90 minutes or so. And I just want to sort of take a step back here because we're in it. We've been in rolling coverage now, right, for something like 2 hours because this is an extraordinary and historic moment in this country. And the reason for that is you have somebody who used to lead this country, accused of disrupting the transfer of power, and who is seeking to lead this country again, not just as a long shot candidate, but as the very clear front runner to take on President Biden.
Look, I keep coming back to, and I mentioned this earlier before our special coverage started, and I'll just share a feeling that I had when I was reading the indictment is that I got a real pit in my stomach because you do realize the weight, not just of the indictment, but of now this election and how the election is going to be the jury, right? The American public is the jury on this. I know that isn't.
No, absolutely not. I hope not. The American people are dumb as fuck, Chuck. Shut the fuck up. No, that sounds like a awful interpretation. Oh my God. Most important election of our lifetimes. First of all, I don't agree with that. I don't believe that. I will stand by that statement. I will stand by that sentiment. They say that about every single election. This one doesn't have enough juice to even push for that narrative, especially because if that was the case, then what the Democratic Party should have done, what the Democratic Party should have done was to fucking not put up Joe Brandon and actually knowing full well how terrible Joe Brandon was going to look, which is an assessment that I made 4 fucking years ago. Okay. It's not like they did not have the capacity to see that Joe Brandon was going to be like 85,000 years old by the time he gets to his second election. And by the time he gets to re-election, his incumbent advantage was going to be null because of how old he is. They would have propped up another leader in the party to basically swap him out. You can't, on the one hand, say this is the most important election of our lifetimes, and then say that's why we have this husk, this goddamn corpse. Okay? You can't do that. You can't do that. So then someone at a certain point is fucking up. If Kamala Harris is your replacement for Joe Brandon, and even if that's the case, even if you think that she is a good substitute for Joe Brandon, if Kamala Harris is the substitute for Joe Brandon, and on top of that, the placements for Kamala Harris are awful because the White House is sending her on failure missions, okay? Then what are we doing? Why are they purposely sending Kamala Harris out to like dive on grenades? And obviously it's her fault as well because she's like deeply uncharismatic. But like, why are we doing that if she is supposed to be the replacement for Joe Brandon? If this is the most important election of our lifetime.
Funding their Trump issue.
With the legal piece of it over, and I want to pick up on the last thing that you just said, Chuck, at least over for now, meaning this arraignment, this moment, this appearance from the former president in court, as we've been talking about and as we'll talk more about. There is now the turning ahead, the looking ahead to the political piece of it. We mentioned the rallies that former President Trump will do. He will undoubtedly talk about this. And yet, Chuck, you bring up an important point, and I want to hear from Mark Murray on this too. The Republican Party, his Republican rivals, are many of them continuing to back him up. Some of them, one of them, Nikki Haley, who is trying to register beyond single digits in the polls here, has not cleared that bar yet, is saying, we got to get past this drama. I don't have it in front of me.
Oh, shit. Oops.
This moment, I'm drowning in papers, but she says something like, we should be focusing on economics. We should be focusing on the border. We shouldn't be trying to put, see whether or not this former president, 77-year-old former president, should be put behind bars or not. She says, I'm sick of the drama here. How much is that indictment fatigue? How much is that strategy? How much do you think that will resonate? Chuck Todd, if we have you, or else Mark Murray.
Oh, sorry, that was Mark Murray. I was going to let Mark on that lead. Look, I understand what she's trying to say, but, look, when Donald Trump's involved, everything revolves around him. And I think, let's not pretend this isn't, if she really wants to try to break through, I think you have to accept the premise that this is a referendum on Donald Trump, and you have to go right at it. Unless Donald Trump starts to regularly poll double digits behind Joe.
Dog, that is such a losing battle. Oh, my God. It's like they went and they found the one battle that is even worse, okay? I don't know. I don't know how well this works. Guys, if you look at polls, that are coming out now about the Trump support in the Republican base, okay? It's solid as a motherfucker. As a matter of fact, it's infinitely more solid than the Democratic support is for Joe Biden, okay? The idea that, like, we should leave this up to the American public is what Donald Trump should be saying. Why is Chuck Todd saying what Donald Trump should be saying for propaganda purposes? Don't indict me. Let the people indict me. Let the people vote for me. And if I lose, then that means that the people don't want me. I hate that. I hate that that is what Chuck Todd is making as an argument, which is a losing argument. Ay, ay, ay. It's so bad.
With what he kind of wanted to create on healthcare in Massachusetts, looking at entitlement programs. And then even in 2016, this Chuck was kind of...
Guys, 70% of Republicans think that global warming is fake and not a problem at all. Okay? Again, another 70% of Republicans think Donald Trump has done nothing wrong at all. You cannot meet that base of support with sanity and reason and logic and say, let's leave it up to those guys. You have an entire 24/7 newscast that is still the most successful news broadcast in the nation that is constantly pumping ridiculous misinformation, brainwashing every single voter-eligible boomer out there. There is no way that we have like an election on, a referendum on this kind of thing, and the results are actually sane, okay? 0% of Trump's core support think he's done anything illegal. 0%. They couldn't find one fucking person in Trump's base of support that thinks he's done anything illegal. That's fucking insane. You can find, you're always in polls, like there's always that like 2%, 3%, like the random guys who are like, yeah, Trump was doing something super illegal, but I still think he should be able to do it. Like you can even find those crazies, dude. You can't. You totally missed the point. He's trying to say do not vote for him without actually saying it. Yeah, that's an idiotic point. I didn't miss that point. I'm just calling it stupid. I'm calling that argument a dumb argument to make.
The courtroom, based on the information that we are getting from our team in court. One of the things that we heard from John Lauro, who was representing former President Trump, was the idea that they need more time. He said, we have a massive amount of discovery here to do. He said something like the government has had 3.5 years to conduct this investigation. That's not quite right, but his point is Special Counsel Jack Smith has had his hands on this stuff longer than John Lauro has. And he said, we need time to see what we got, get our arms around it, essentially. I'm paraphrasing here. What does that mean for how quickly we might see a trial, the possibility that a trial could extend beyond the November 2024 election? What's your sense?
You can save the tape on this one. The defense is not going to get 3.5 years in order to prepare the defense. That is not happening. But the defense.
Yeah, great take by Fango Lives, okay? There's a reason why juries get sequestered, okay? Because they do not want any kind of tampering. They get sequestered because they do not want outside influences dictating the outcome of a fucking result, a court case. It's nuts.
Both defense and prosecution are building the case at the same time. And in those cases, sometimes the government or the prosecutor will let the case languish. Sometimes they have too many cases. They're not organized. And then speedy trial comes into play because you either have to put up or shut up, and the defendant can get the case dismissed. In this case, the government's already been investigating this case for some time.
For the record, you said already happens, but okay. I know, but the goal is to avoid that. Okay, the goal is to, try to limit that as best as possible. So the very reason why that exists implies that you can't leave it up to a goddamn referendum with Fox News playing on one side.
In the middle
That's right.
of the campaign and the election.
So, Chuck, would a federal judge take that into consideration?
Well, I would hope not, but inevitably so. I mean, Danny is exactly right. When the government indicts a case like this, it is ready. They may, in fact, have already put the exhibit stickers on the exhibits. And 2 years is an outrageously long time, and 70 days may well be too short because at this point, the defense is catching up. However, I'm biased in the following way, Hallie. I come from the Eastern District of Virginia, which is known widely as the Rocket Docket because cases move with dispatch. They move quickly. Continuances are unusual. I often believe that was helpful to prosecutors because we do normally charge when we are ready to proceed to trial. Not always. Sometimes our hand is forced or a crime is stopped while it is occurring, and we charge it federally, and we are also playing catch up. But more often than not, the prosecution is ahead of the defense. I hope these cases can be resolved before the election. Remember, even if Mr. Trump wins next November, he doesn't take office until January of 2025. So there may be a little bit more time than we're actually talking about. But it can be done quickly as 70 days, unlikely. But I do think it can happen before the election. And I would hope it would happen before the election.
Chuck, because we're going to lose you to what I know are a million other obligations that you have, were you surprised to see that there was not a change of venue motion being made by the Trump defense team today? Is it possible that that could still come?
Oh, it's likely it will still come.
Okay.
It wouldn't be made today. Today would not be the appropriate time or place to make it. So I think two things will happen. They will move for a change of venue, arguing that they can't get a fair trial in D.C., and their motion for a change of venue will be denied, and they will have a trial in D.C.
I wish there was a second camera on Danny Cevallos as you're speaking, Chuck, because he is vigorously nodding and charading along with you in agreement.
I was mouthing because you're absolutely right. I mean, the motion will be made. It'll be made more for the record than anything else. The motion will be denied. But look, as a defense attorney, you got to try everything you can. And by the way, this is the kind of case, this is the kind of defendant where trying everything you can and making a record is key, because appeals go up to the Court of Appeals, but the next stop on that road and the final stop is the Supreme Court. So anything that Trump's attorneys can try to get before the Supreme Court, and ideally before trial, not after trial, although in this case, in the D.C. case, there are limited, if any, opportunities to try and get
Biden's approval rating is worse than all contemporary presidents at this point in a re-election. It's really fucking bad.
After, if he is convicted.
Chuck, reporting from the courtroom suggested that multiple other judges in the federal court were in the room where Donald Trump was being arraigned today. Is that typical? Would we normally see that? Or is their presence an indication of just how significant of a moment this is?
I'm trying to think about all the cases I tried and all the cases that were tried in my courthouse, and I think I can say, Hallie, that I have never seen anything like that before. That strikes me as unusual. When I heard that, I winced a little bit. I mean, today, Mr. Trump, for 27 minutes, was as ordinary a citizen as he could possibly be. He was a defendant in a criminal case. He stood like everyone else when the judge walked in. He sat when the judge sat. He was placed under oath. He answered questions with a no, Your Honor, or a yes, Your Honor. And when the judge departed, he stood again. I think that defendants in criminal cases should be treated with respect, and they should be treated alike. And anything that makes this more of a spectacle.
Biden's in a really bad position because all of like the maybe marginal benefits that have occurred as far as like economic relief, that is like, again, very marginal and will always take time for people to truly experience it and recognize the changes. What the fuck? All of that is never seen as a product of Biden's leadership because of how old he is. And every single negative aspect is attributed to him being old and mismanaging the Democratic Party and the presidency, the office of the presidency from the jump. So no matter what happens, he's in a lose-lose situation. There's no other way that I can make sense of the polls, okay? Like, obviously, shit is always bad, okay? But when you look at polls, you're supposed to look at polls, for example, during COVID in 2020. And if you look at the polls during COVID in 2020 under Trump's presidency, okay, and people are saying that the situation at hand, or 2019, the situation at hand was better. The outcome of the economy was seen by the people as better than the situation now. Well, that's objectively untrue. So there's a mismatch of the actual reality of the circumstances at hand and the way people are perceiving it. And I think that the wires are being crossed due to optics, due to the fact that Joe Brandon is very old and is seen as like either a corporate puppet, a lifeless husk that is incompetent, and that's why you feel terrible about your current economic situation, or even if there are positives, even if there are things that are turning for the better, like the downswing of inflation, even though it's not completely, you're actually brain dead after that take. W. Trump, how? Thanks, my man. I think they're over-polling Republicans to make up for past biases. Yeah.
federal case against
I'll
former
talk about
President
Biden's
Trump.
fumbles
it
in
is
a second.
striking image that illustrates, I think, the sort of legal web that the former president faces.
Biden is a better legislator than most American presidents.
100%, Hallie. And I mean, you
dumb.
know from covering the former president during his campaign and at the White House, his inner circle is truly this gelled, loyal group of people. I spoke to an investigator who's been involved, not in this particular case, but involved in some of the cases against Donald Trump. And they said to me, of all the cases and all the investigations and everything they've ever been involved in, federal, state, they have never seen an inner circle so loyal to a person as Trump's inner circle is so loyal to him. Alan Weisselberg, his CFO, facing significant jail time in New York in a state prosecution, kept on board with the Trump team. Even after he was indicted, they held a birthday party for him, and he attended. I think that's just a great example of the closeness of this team and potentially the challenge. And I think this is going to be the next step, and particularly in the Florida case where the federal prosecutors have already filed the Garcia motion to ask some questions of some of the people that have been charged in that case of saying, hey, are you aware that your defense attorneys are also defense attorneys for some of the other people who are either potential witnesses or potential defendants or defendants in this case? And do they have your best interests in mind? And I think as we see this inner circle and more members of it get in a legal jam, so to speak, I think there's going to be more questions as to whether or not people are getting their best defense, if you will. I think prosecutors, they've already filed in Florida, are making those same requests or asking those same questions as well. So I think that's going to be something important to follow. And then as we know from FEC filings this week, in our work of our NBC political unit, they tracked over $20 million from a PAC associated with Trump that's been used to pay attorneys. And so we're still digging through that money to figure out which attorney is getting what and then who are they paying for the defense for. But I think that image that
$40 million have been spent on legal defense funds for Donald Trump thus far from PACs, which is insane. I mean, like, every dollar that you're giving to any kind of like Trump candidacy PAC is directly going to him and his numerous legal troubles at this point. No, it's 40. I'm pretty sure it's 40. It's not fucking, it's not 20. That's what I saw. Maybe I'm wrong. It might even be more than that. But like all your donos are going to this man's individual private defense fund at this point. But these guys deserve it. They're so fucking stupid. Republicans are so dumb. It was 20 million last year. Yeah, it's 40 now.
Trump should be backed by the rest of the party in the face of these legal challenges. You are posted up, of course, in Bedminster, New Jersey, as the former president is on.
Infrastructure, chips, first gun bill in 30 years, 2 reconciliation bills when Obama did none, including Inflation Reduction Act. So, yeah, Biden has been more effective than every president in a generation working with more obstructionist Republicans. Yeah. I love spelling out this kind of shit with the hidden implication that ultimately they were almost every single thing that you mentioned, especially like the most laughable one being the gun bill. Like bringing up the gun bill alongside the IRA basically gives the game away. Okay. One is a neutered version of something that was promised that was supposed to be much more and a necessity, but yet it's still positive. The gun bill, on the other hand, is nothing. So the idea that you brought that up alongside one another implies that you are desperate to make Biden look good, and those measures are not going to make, they're not going to meet the muster. They're not enough for people to go, oh, wow, that's great. It's not. Getting something done in gridlock Congress is only a positive if you don't think of what something is, if you don't think about the outcomes, and if you don't think about what was originally promised, and last but not least, if you don't think about like what the impact of said bills are going to be, and you will always be led astray. That's why you look at polls, because you're an MSNBC watcher, a New York Times reader, looking at the polls going, what the fuck's going on? Like, I don't understand. Why won't people appreciate Biden for all the incredible things that he's done? Okay? Why won't people appreciate Biden? It's like, yeah, well, one, because even if you are a watcher of politics, a diligent watcher of politics, you should recognize that it's not ever going to be, like, your performance should never be measured by how deceptive your enemies were in Congress and how much you had to concede to them. That is a mark off, okay, from your accomplishments. Republicans do not measure their electoral successes or their legislative agenda successes on how much the Democrats fucking combated it. They don't give a shit. They sidestep Congress when they can. Come on. Anyway, ultimately, one thing that he could do to like legitimately change this around, especially in demographics that he desperately needs to win over, is the student loan debt relief. Just say, fuck it. I got a big ass dick. I don't give a fuck, Jack. Especially because he's losing younger black and brown populations. Some of the black and brown voters are now also not only being hemorrhaged away from the political process entirely, but also going to the fucking Republican Party, which is insane.
Beats a minute, so.
Oh my God, the officer defended the Capitol. I don't blame Biden, but Trump isn't younger either. He's the same age as Biden when he became president. They got just 3 years difference, so the rep narrative about old age doesn't really work, but Dems are too doo-doo to attack back. Well, also because Donald Trump, for all of his faults and failures, still does come across as more energetic and more telegenic than Brandon. Brandon is a great retail politician, and he was for most of his career. That much is kind of gone now at this point. He's basically a husk, a lifeless husk. Whereas Trump on the other hand, still can coherently piece. Like, look at this. He's not any different. He hasn't lost a single fucking step from the past election. He hasn't lost a single step. Biden, on the other hand, looks decrepit.
Very sad day for America, and it was also very sad driving through Washington, D.C. and seeing the filth and the decay and all of the broken buildings and walls and the graffiti. This is not the place that I left. It's a very sad thing to see it. When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America. This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary and leading Biden by a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him. We can't let this happen in America. Thank you very much.
Do you want these trials to happen before the 2024 election?
So there we are. Donald Trump is heading back to Bedminster on his plane, and he said that it was a sad day for America. He then said it was sad to see the filth and decay, as he put it, in Washington. Has to be said, not a city he's ever been that fond of. He famously called it the swamp and said he would drain it.
I was about to say, it's like Trump has never said anything positive about D.C. He's like, I used to love D.C., but it sucks now. Sad.
He then went on to say that it is nothing short of political persecution of the person leading the Republican primary. So a very short speech from Donald Trump, very brief, and no questions, and he will now be heading off back to, we think, Bedminster in New Jersey, his golf club there, with his legal team, who will be all on that plane.
Yeah, they've never led him astray.
And his hearing
Good to get some
done.
FaceTime with the boys.
Not guilty. James Matthews is still at the courthouse. And James, very brief words from Donald Trump, but typically defiant.
Yeah, typically defiant. And, you know, we've heard all that before. The central theme is that this is a political witch hunt, a weaponization of the justice system. That feeds into his fundraising. It feeds into his presidential campaign. What will his defense be? Well, I think we got a sense of that actually before the hearing, Mark. We heard from Alina Habba, Donald Trump's lawyer, and amidst all the talk of individuals who were in the room, Donald Trump's inner circle, telling him, warning him that he had lost the election, that claims of a rigged election were false. She made the point that this was a man receiving advice from many people, not necessarily all of whom were giving him the same advice. So that seems to chime with what we've heard from his legal team, that one strand of his defense will be that he was acting on the...
Yeah, he just has bad attorneys, man, which we knew already. Except he did attorney shopping. It makes no fucking sense. He had also competent attorneys time and time again. In every single circumstance, he had attorneys that were like, dude, don't do this. It's like very illegal and also stupid. To which his reply was, okay, shut the fuck up. I'm going to not listen to you and I'm going to go find a dumbass that will tell me what I want to hear.
The advice of his lawyers. Therefore, he was an innocent in all of this. I mean, that will be played out in due course. A trial date due to be fixed on the 28th of August at the next hearing. It is being billed here, quite rightly, I think, as the most significant, the biggest criminal trial in American history. The prosecution of a former president for nothing less than crimes against democracy. It's no ordinary case. It will have no ordinary consequences.
Yeah, and as you say, James, I mean, the argument now is going on about when this trial should take place. Trump's lawyer, I see, said in this hearing that the time frame of the government is absurd.
Yeah, the government wants to get it on quickly. A speedy trial, as I say. That
Get
places
it on.
a 70-day limit, so they want to bring this to court in short order. Donald Trump's team say that's just not realistic, given the amount of discovery. Actually, what they said was they want to take a couple of days for discovery to get a handle on the amount of material and evidence that they have to go through so that they can build an appropriate defense.
He's like, Trump's team is like, listen, Your Honor, we did so many crimes so flagrantly that it took you 3 years to compile everything. Okay? It's going to be really difficult for us to build an adequate defense here, given the subject matter and given how much my client has done crimes in the open. If one more dumbass asks me about Lizzo when I'm in the middle of fucking Donald Trump being arrested, I'm going to lose my mind. Yes, bro, she's weird and creepy and shitty to her fucking dancers. Who cares? Jesus fucking Christ. Nobody fucking cares, man. I don't care. I saw a tweet that was really funny the other day where he was like, yeah, I hate Lizzo for being fat, but now I see like a lot of people are hating on her for some other reason, and, you know, great. It's like half of the fucking timeline wants it. The other half wants me to, I guess, defend her or something. I don't give a shit about her at all. I mean, who cares? Yeah, she's a fucking weird Hollywood celebrity. Yeah, women of color care, but I get that's not your domain. What do you mean women of color care? Are you, as a woman of color, a fucking famous Hollywood celebrity with like weird, weird experiences with your fucking workers? What the fuck do you mean? What are you, Jeff Bezos? This is some Jeff Bezos ass shit right here. Yeah, women of color care. I went to the doctor and turns out I'm 100% that bitch. Like, why are we holding up Lizzo as a fucking beacon of prosperity and a beacon of, like, civil rights or liberties or some shit? She's just like, come on, guys. She's athletic, but also overweight. What's going on here? Is that why? That's all it takes? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, she gets shit on unjustifiably, and a lot of people hate her for ridiculous reasons, mostly because she's fat and also a black woman. But now there's a real reason for people to be shitty to her. So that's what's going on. And all hell has fucking broken loose. It's like, wow, another Hollywood celebrity being weird. That's crazy. Blows my mind. This tweet makes me laugh so much. Oh, Lizzo, Lizzo, Lizzo. You make neckbeard so deliciously angry. Oh, Jesus Christ. Anyway, it's fascinating how much better chat is when we're covering straight politics in comparison to when people want you to cover either internet drama or celebrity news is fucking absurd. Anyway, let's get back to the, like, actual issues and not the Lizzo shit until later, okay? Please.
For Donald Trump. And it's important that this is seen to be fair at this stage for all concerned, certainly for the legal process, because if there is seen to be a misstep by the presiding judge, then there is, of course, the possibility that that could lead to an appeal following any conviction. But the clock is ticking. Politically, the clock is very much ticking, and the deadline is tight. There's a presidential election in November 2024. Donald Trump is facing 3 criminal trials, which will punctuate his presidential campaign.
I'm not gonna lie. To me, the third arraignment and this lack of interest over it, and more people in the chat begging for me to cover fucking Lizzo, shows that at the top of the hour, there's going to be a 3-minute ad break regardless. But it also shows me that if you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe for $5 or for free by connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account. It also shows to me that you can avoid the 3-minute ad break by getting gifted a sub if you're lucky. Okay. And last but not least, it shows me that people just don't care about the Trump shit at all.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Like, at all. It's wild. By the third one, people have lost interest. Like, more people care about Lizzo and want me to cover it than anything else.
The question is, will we be looking at Donald Trump, the convict, by the time we get to the next election? He will hope, one thinks, one imagines, I think it's fair to say that as far as possible he can push each of those criminal trials beyond the election, and should he win in November 2024, then he finds himself, or will do, in a position to influence the charges against him, to sack the prosecutors who have been chasing him, and of course to line up a presidential pardon, not for the first time, but this time for himself.
Is it because they took too long to charge him? No, because, like, this is the third one. You know what I mean?
This group of people trying to overturn the election, the people who are boots on the ground in the trenches, they may have more culpability in the eyes of another prosecutor. So I wouldn't rule out the possibility that Donald Trump somehow escapes indictment in Fulton County. But at the same time, now that we've seen a federal indictment based on charges alleged in Georgia, I wouldn't be that surprised if he was a defendant.
Danny Savalos, thank
Hedging.
you. Well, you are an attorney, after all.
That's
Thank
what I
you.
do.
I'm going to ask you to stand by right you are, and I thank everybody who's been with us for the past 30 minutes of coverage. We've got another hour of coverage coming up. It is now 6 o'clock Eastern, the top of the hour. I'm Hallie Jackson with our continuing coverage here on NBC News Now. Let's take a beat. Here's Here's where we are as we speak. Former President Donald Trump is in the air. He's in his plane heading back to New Jersey after a moment that is making history in this country. Because for the first time ever, we have seen now a former president of the U.S. pleading not guilty to accusations he tried to overturn an election. It was a dramatic 27 minutes in court as Donald Trump was read those counts that he faces based on his lies about fraud in the legitimate 2020 election. He responded that he was not guilty, and in the last hour, he's calling himself a victim of political persecution. Watch.
This is not the place that I left. It's a very sad thing to see it. When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America.
That is something we have heard from former President Trump again and again, but never on a day when he's been arraigned on those charges until at least for now. I want to show the only picture we have so far of him from the courtroom. Here it is. It is a sketch because remember, there were no cameras in court. That was something that is not permitted in federal court. And there is now an open question. When his trial happens, will we be able to see it? Will we be able to hear it? Will there be live audio, for example, an audio live stream? That is something that we will talk about coming up later this hour, a question folks have. Remember, the indictment, I want to show you here. You can kind of see it in this picture. Former President Trump. It's not like Law and Order, where you have the judge in the middle and the two tables, the defense and the prosecution on either side. They were facing each other, quite directly facing each other. You can see on the other side, the prosecutors for the U.S. government. In the room, Special Counsel Jack Smith, who is now bringing his second federal indictment against Donald Trump. You see him here. Jack Smith, based on the reporting from inside the courtroom, was looking around. He was assessing former President Trump, as former President Trump was doing as well. There's a lot of evidence here in this case, including in-the-moment notes from former Vice President Mike Pence, including emails from senior Justice Department employees, and including information about unauthorized, fake, or alternative elector ballots that were introduced as part of this alleged plot. It is a wide-ranging indictment from the Justice Department, and we will see how it plays out in court. I want to bring in now our team who's covering all of this for us. Let me get to Garrett Hake, who's live for us in Washington.
I mean, you say fuck Mike Pence, but like his testimony, he's like the key witness here.
Who is also outside federal court, our investigative correspondent, NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos, and NBC News political unit director Mark Murray. Garrett, I want to start with you, and I want to pull back the curtain a bit to how this unfolded. Tiny courtroom, not big. Tons of interest, tons of people, only about 11 seats for members of the media inside court, only, I think, fewer than a half a dozen for members of the public, right? I mean, this was a packed courtroom, lots of security, Secret Service, U.S. Marshals. You happen to have one of those seats. Tell us what we should know and where this goes.
Yeah, Hallie, every seat in this courtroom was taken, and I've been in all three courtrooms now, and I realized as I was thinking through this,
people saying the Dems are after him. Literally every piece of evidence is from messages and testimony from his inner circle. Yeah. But the Dems are after him for bringing it to light. Duh.
were attacked on that day who wanted to be in the room to see Donald Trump stand in front of a judge. And in fact, there were other judges who've tried other January 6th cases and their families.
Yeah, I got rid of closed captions because I hate the deaf.
This moment to watch Donald Trump stand in front of a judge and in this case plead not guilty.
Impaired.
Now, I was struck by the fact that there's now on his third arraignment, Donald
Despite
Trump
the fact that
seems
I need
more
captions
comfortable
as
in this
well.
environment than he did the first time. Now look, this is someone who's used to being in control, not used to being made to wait or be told to stand or told when he has to speak or when he has to sit. And that's what happens in this environment where a judge is in control. That said, he was looser. He was chatting with his attorneys throughout. But even sort of more looser than he and more clearly in command of the room was Jack Smith. Not seated at the prosecution's table, but just behind it in a row reserved.
I hate this. It's like so much fanfare and coverage afforded to the vibes in a fucking courtroom and shit. Like, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. Give us the fucking juice. You know what I mean? Yeah, Ron DeSantis in New Hampshire, by the way, discusses plans for the federal workforce. We're going to start slitting throats on day one, which is awesome. He's saying he's going to start killing federal employees. Obviously, it's like a euphemism, but still wild. Let's hear from a brilliant, bold, beautiful patriot about this indictment.
Yeah. And the people that love Trump, they feel like this is a witch hunt. And they feel like all the things he's getting indicted for are bullshit anyway. Not only does it not work, but it kind of hardens their position that he's being targeted. And that these are like the actions of a banana republic. You take your political rival and you arrest him. And specifically, you charge him with things that you're fucking guilty of. Like the documents, like the classified documents. Biden's guilty of the exact same issue.
You gotta respect the level of deceptiveness that's been used. I mean, look at what Hillary did, going and saying, hey, it's Russia, but it was really, what she was doing. And now they're using a similar play as well. Yeah.
And the people that love Trump, they feel like this is a witch hunt.
What? I wish Hillary Clinton went to jail for so many reasons. One, because it would have been fucking dope. Two, because maybe it would shut these fucking idiots up for like 3 seconds. But like probably not. Jerry's unwatchable now. The funniest thing is the channel that originally clipped this, Myth Informed, used to literally be like an anti-Rogan channel. They used to criticize all the dumb shit that this ape is saying. And then they turned into like pro-Rogan somewhere along the way because now there are 3 guys from Milwaukee that oppose authoritarian ideology. And I don't even know how they... Like, I used to watch their shit all the time. I used to look at their clips all the time. I think they just like watched Rogan so much.
He's being targeted.
How is Joe Biden specifically trying to arrest Trump, Lamau? Come on, he's using the DOJ. Don't think too much into it, chat. Come on, these guys are fucking stupid. Okay, if you think a little bit too hard into it, then it's going to hurt your brain.
Much election fraud do you think is real?
Here we go, Joe. You want to go to election fraud?
Yeah, because I don't think it's zero.
No,
it's
no
not
way.
zero.
Yeah, no shit, it's not zero, you fucking... Oh my God, you are such an ape. Oh, it is impossible for there to be zero election fraud. Or not election fraud, voter fraud. There's so much election fraud. It's a different thing. Okay? The point is it enough to legitimately change the outcome of an election? And there has been studies conducted on this from right-wing operatives, from right-wing think tanks, from right-wing administrations, from liberal administrations, nonpartisan NGOs, and every single one, including Donald Trump's own Election Security and Integrity Committee, they have found the same exact thing. No, there isn't there isn't enough voter fraud for it to even move the needle a little bit. The greatest proof that they use is the American Enterprise Institute's large, comprehensive study over the course of like 30 years. That study shows 1,200 instances of individual voter fraud. 1,200. Now you might think, wow, that's a lot. Except it's 1,200 over like 1 billion ballots that have been cast over the course of 30 years in every midterm election and in every presidential election. You can't even sway. You can't even move the needle on one local election with 1,200 fraudulent voters. And by the way, a lot of those voters are Republican. That's the other part that we never talk about. Everybody always talks about, oh my God, voter fraud is happening so much, so egregious, it's so crazy. It's like, Oh, yeah? Well, you know, Republicans are also doing it. The most notable ones, oh, it's the Heritage Foundation one. Sorry, not American Enterprise Institute. Oh, sorry. 1,400 now, not 1,200. 1,400. This is their big, crazy revelation. If you think that this over 1 billion votes that have been casted over the course of 30 years, more than 1 billion votes, if you think that this is statistically significant, you are a fucking ape. Okay, why do you call him an ape? He is just not informed. Joe Rogan? That's why I'm calling him an ape. Stupid. The clip isn't about voter fraud. What is it about then? Those are proven, though? What does that mean? Yeah, of course these are proven. What are you saying? Okay. And also, a lot of these convictions, exactly, are people who had lost their voting rights, but they thought they could vote after serving their sentence, like the people in Florida. Some of these are also improperly filed voter registration. It's not even like deliberate attempts. It's not even fucking deliberate attempts of like, I'm going to go and do voter fraud to vote for Donald Trump or some shit like that. It is so laughable that this is what moves the needle for the Republican Party. Proven. No shit, Sherlock. How am I supposed to prove something that's made up? Yeah, that's the funniest part. It's like, those are proven instances of voter fraud. What about the unproven instances of voter fraud? Okay. How do you prove something that's not real? Like, go ahead. Prove that you're not a pedophile. Okay? I'll call you a pedophile. Go ahead. Prove that you're not a pedophile. Good luck. How are you going to do that? Even 1,401 election would be minuscule. Exactly. Oh. You can say a lot of stuff about American elections, okay? Voter suppression is out of control. It's really fucking weird that you can't vote on a federal holiday. These are all deliberate attempts. Press the number of people that vote, especially working class people. But the one thing you can't say is that American elections are insecure. For all intents and purposes, for all of its failures, American elections are pretty secure as it gets. That's it. Couldn't a lot of those election frauds be? No, voter fraud. Individual voter fraud is different than election fraud. Election fraud, election engineering, electioneering, or even voter suppression. These are things that happen regularly. These are the real problems, not voter fraud in the sense that like people are going out and like voting by the dozens. Undocumented immigrants are going out and voting illegally. All that stuff is bullshit. As a matter of fact, that narrative, in spite of the fact that there's no empirical evidence to suggest is true, is utilized by the Republicans to justify election fraud, voter suppression.
Zero. I think we could all agree it's not zero.
No way it's not zero.
And we know that these voting machines can be fucked with.
Yeah.
And we know that there's some irregularities, all that Kerry Lake stuff.
I hope he gets sued by Dominion, dude. Fuck you. There's no fucking way this piece of shit doesn't know what he's doing. I'm sorry. I hope Dominion wipes the fucking floor, slaps him with a fucking $1 billion lawsuit. Come on.
In Arizona that they're trying to dismiss, it doesn't look like that's invalid. It looks like there's real fraud there. It looks like there's some real shenanigans there. At the very least, there was voting machines that weren't working properly, and it seems very suspicious that a lot of them were in Republican areas. There's a lot of shenanigans.
Oh my God. We, as an American society, in the year 2023 of our holy Lord, are unfortunately too stupid to come back from. It's done. We've passed the barrier of stupidity, and it's done. This is the same exact narrative that dumbasses deployed against the sound of freedom. Oh, well, the AC wasn't on. What are they hiding? Do they want me to stop? Voting machines fucking up in any county, okay, is unfortunately the norm. Oh, yeah. Carrie Lake sued for defamation by Arizona GOP election officials she accused of election sabotage. The cost of clown college outpacing is the other higher ed because the demand for clowns seems to be skyrocketing. Oh. I work in IT like many do, and the number of systems that just decide not to work is very common. I know. And again, machines fucking up unintentionally is very common. The real problem is when you actually refuse to put voting machines in polling stations, for example. And that is what is done deliberately, oftentimes by Republicans. The people that refuse to open up polling stations in black and brown neighborhoods. They do that by design. They close polling stations in black and brown neighborhoods on purpose. That is by design. That's the real shit, not this, oh, wow, one machine fucked up.
Coordinated efforts to make sure that certain people get elected. I don't know how far they go, but I know it's not zero. How much election fraud do you think?
I don't know if you're following what Vivek said yesterday. He came out and says, look, I want to compete against Trump, but not by using something like this and what they're doing on the other side. All I'm saying is, if Newsom shows that he's being respectful of Biden, because what is your theory of why DeSantis is not having momentum? What do you think about when you think about DeSantis?
Trump. He doesn't have the personality. I just don't think he can compete with Trump. Trump has just this cult behind him. I mean, these people that love Trump, he's their hero. And the things that he says, the bombastic personality, the way he can control a room, the way he speaks in an arena of screaming fans, and makes people laugh and says things that they want to hear. DeSantis can't do that. I mean, he did a great job with Florida, and people loved his position as a governor in Florida, but I feel like he's fucking that up.
For the record, I do love seeing my commentary for months and months on Ron DeSantis, specifically as it pertains to COVID, get reflected on NPR and New York Times as well months later. One thing that I talked about a lot with Ron DeSantis was his only strong element was that during COVID, he just didn't shut down, and he was ruthless about it. And Republicans loved that, right? Even though he originally did shut down in the beginning. And nobody in the United States of America, other than like people in the margins who are either on one side of the issue or on the other, like either who still want to have COVID shutdowns or have like extra protection and protocol, who are technically on the right side, at least overly cautious, but still on the right side of medical history, versus the other people who are psychotic freaks who still are like, oh, the vaccines made you gay. Most Americans don't want to think about COVID. And I've said it so many times. Ron DeSantis had its moment in the spotlight with moves that he made during a time frame that nobody wants to think about because it ultimately makes them feel bad. Most Americans do not want to look back at COVID. They do not want to look back at the weight they gained. They do not want to look back and think about their relatives that fucking passed away in a hospital in a ventilator with no one around. They do not want to look back at the dark times. They want to move forward and they want to have regular old experiences once again, and they've achieved that. So for that reason, this is a big benefit for Trump, this election cycle, and it's a big problem for Ron DeSantis because Trump's COVID experience in the eyes of the American public was mismanagement. Ron DeSantis' experience in the eyes of the Floridian population that voted for him in the gubernatorial race was very positive. But considering that nobody wants to think about COVID now, and if you constantly bring up COVID, you're going to be like annoying. This works against Ron DeSantis. He's got nothing else. All the woke, anti-woke legislation, all this other shit, it sucks. It's not meeting the expectations of the broader Republican base. They don't give a fuck. And polls are showing this as well, for the record. They don't care that much. They still think, one, Trump is better on woke issues than Ron DeSantis, which is hilarious because it's all charisma and nothing to do with like actual legislation at all. Okay? They do not give a shit about like Ron DeSantis making it illegal for a teacher to, have a photo of her and her partner at the desk. You know what I mean? Like, Republicans that care about that are fucking insane, but the broader voter population doesn't care. Part of it is because nobody likes smarmy, annoying woke scolds that are constantly fucking ruthlessly yelling about one issue. In the lead up to the Donald Trump administration and Donald Trump victory, the 2010s, the later or the beginning of the 2010s, at the second part of the Obama administration, were normies getting frustrated with SJWs because they were constantly fucking screeching. Like, constantly complaining, like, on issues that were completely irrelevant to the grand scheme of things, oftentimes complaining because they wanted to take your treats away somehow. And part of that wasn't because they were on the leftist side or the progressive side of history that there was so much disdain. Part of that was literally because of repetition. There was too much. At first, there was fatigue against it, and then there was disdain. Okay? Now, the pendulum has swung in the other direction, where all of the hyper right-wing weirdos are doing the same fucking shit that they were ripping into bits in the Gamergate era. Okay? They are basically doing the top 10 man-spreader violations, but for the right. When they're like, oh, don't consume Bud Light, it's trans. Don't do this, it's gay. Don't do that, it's woke. Constantly fucking screeching over and over and over again about like, oh, don't go shop at Target. How dare you? Yeah, they've become social injustice warriors. But ultimately, they're fucking annoying. Okay? They're annoying. Constantly chirping about boycotts and whatnot. Constantly talking about like, oh, my Starbucks order doesn't have the Christmas logo on it, I'm going to kill myself, it's going to be boring after a while. People are going to get annoyed. So that's what's going on with the social injustice warriors and the vice signalers, all of which make up the base, the hypothetical base that Ron DeSantis thinks exists out there, because his triangulation is so fucking stupid.
You think he should have ran?
No.
Oh, so
No,
you don't
I
even think he should have ran?
I don't think he can beat Trump. As long as Trump doesn't get arrested, as long as he is, he's been indicted again, and who knows where that goes. But if Trump's not in jail, he can't beat him.
Yeah.
And the people that love Trump, they feel like this is a witch hunt, and they feel like all the things he's getting indicted for are bullshit anyway. Not only does it not work, but it kind of hardens their position that he's being targeted. And that these are like the actions of a banana republic. You take your political.
Yeah, we just saw this part. But, yeah, to be fair, though, guys, Donald Trump could be fucking indicted for, like, murdering a veteran with his bare hands, and people will be like, it's a witch hunt. Like, sorry, you can't look at the situation and be like, well, his fucking psychotic mouth-breathing fan base think that he's awesome. You know what I mean? Ghouls, a lot of them. Great. Oh. Electronic voting is always going to have trust issues. It will never be transparent. Some people will never understand computers. Electronic voting is not a need either. Great take from Indibi, who I assume is Turkish, because I'm shocked if you're an American and this oblivious about our voting processes. The United States of America does not have electronic voting. I believe there's only one state in the nation that has electronic voting in the United States of America. Did you know this? It's paper, which is the safest way to vote. Even though you might think you're pressing buttons on a machine when you go in to the booth, the voting booth, that button is generating paper outputs, which can always be hand counted. There is a paper ballot inside of the machine. There you go. I just looked into the voting database. Only about 100 are duplicate voting, and it's over decades. Many are also because the person moved and thus voted twice in a national election. The majority are ineligible to vote due to convictions, while the rest are someone registering as another person without following the exact rules, or it's a corrupt scheme by a local politician. Yeah. I think Tennessee might be the only place that has electronic voting with no paper backups. Yes, it's like some fucking right-wing place. Or maybe Louisiana? I don't remember. Anyway, that's an incredibly stupid take. Electronic voting has never been safer. Even curbed coerced voting is isolated in areas used to be controlled by kernels. No, electronic voting still has issues with safety, as far as I understand. Paper voting is better. Paper voting is more safe. That doesn't mean electronic voting is unsafe. They do it in Estonia. It's like 100% electronic. But there are still insecurities in electronic voting, as far as I understand. This is not my forte. This is not my forte at all. But I do believe that there is still always going to be cybersecurity issues. And I do believe that the professionals that say paper ballots are still safer. Anyway. The voter fraud stuff is so mind-bogglingly stupid, but
for Donald Trump's inauguration. There was a peaceful transfer of power in 2016, despite what was, yes, that was a close election in 2016. Yet when we had another close election in 2020, there was no Donald Trump. The President of the United States decided not to be at that inauguration of Joe Biden. We, of course, with January 6th happening, did not have a peaceful transfer of power.
Yeah, look, the people most skeptical of electronic voting are STEM Lord programmers, of which I am one. Software is hard to secure and maintain. Exactly. You're claiming that in Brazil there's a black box, but I would rather be on the side of safety and caution, even if I'm like overly cautious, because I don't think it takes much to maintain paper ballots as a backup, at the very least, on top of electronic voting, which is what happens in a lot of states in the United States.
And that we are taking live pictures from a chopper of a car driving down a highway, regardless of whether or not that car belongs to the former president. We have done this now for multiple indictments. It is a bit of a spectacle. It created one, at least at the Washington airport, where our team, our producer Frank Thorpe, got some pictures of people snapping photos from inside the airport of Donald Trump's plane with the Capitol off in the distance. We have some photos we can pull up there. This is what Donald Trump, in many ways, and his team want to see. They want to see this become something where it is about.
Yeah, technically, this is Crime Watch as well.
He tries to capitalize on that through fundraising and through his comments. Talk to us about what it's been like on the ground there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there are a lot of people who recognize that this is, today was a moment in history, something to be recorded and remembered. And so people came out in significant numbers trying to do that. I'm going to step out of the way here so you can see a little bit of what's left on the ground here outside the courthouse. A little bit of a police presence still at this point, still a very significant media presence on the street right in front of the courthouse. We also saw a lot of demonstrators, people who were here with signs and with flags, people supporting the former president, as well as people who held up signs that said lock him up, folks who did not support or do not support the former president. At the same time, there were a lot of people here who didn't really seem to have a political angle that they were pursuing, but wanted to just see what was happening. There were people standing next to me across the street, looking down toward the parking garage of the courthouse here, who just wanted a glimpse of the former president as he came into the courthouse, as he left the courthouse. They had their phones up, taking pictures as well. Again, I think an effort for folks to be able to snap a memory from this moment in history, regardless of what side of the political spectrum they may be on. Allie?
Aaron Gilchrist live for us there in Washington. Ken Delanian is back now from federal court. Ken, we are getting some new sketches in as well of former President Trump inside court. Reminder, no cameras there, so we are relying on the reporting from our team who was in the room at the time. Talk us through your key takeaways here. What are you looking for next as far as what's coming down the pipeline?
Well, there's clearly going to be a battle between the prosecutors and the defense lawyers about scheduling in this case. That was one of the great themes that emerged from this hearing. And by the way, I'll just say, having watched both the arraignment in Miami, Hallie, at the media overflow room there, and now today watching this one on video, the two events could not have been more starkly different in terms of atmospherics. Down in Miami, the magistrate judge was cracking jokes. It was a very loose atmosphere. He never asked Mr. Trump a question. Mr. Trump didn't utter a word. His lawyer entered the plea on his behalf. Today was much different. This magistrate judge was all business. It was a more intense, sober atmosphere. The courtroom was a smaller venue, so it felt more crowded. There was not a seat in the House. And Mr. Trump was addressed directly by the magistrate, questioned. He had to give his name and his date of birth, and as she went over the charges and the penalties and the conditions of release, in treating him like any other defendant in criminal court, it was just a very sobering, kind of bracing thing, especially for me because I've covered cases in that courthouse and I've seen sort of regular criminal cases in those very same blonde wood paneled courtrooms, and to see the former president of the United States sitting at the defense table was remarkable. But in terms of what's next, so August 28th is the next hearing in this case before the actual judge, Tanya Chutkan, who asked both sides to essentially submit briefs about scheduling, when they think this case could go to trial. And Trump's lawyers, in particular John Lauro, immediately started to push back on that, saying, he can't even really consider that until he knows the scope of the discovery in this case, the amount, the volume of documents the government is going to turn over. And the government immediately, the prosecution, pushed back on that and said, look, we are pressing for a speedy trial here. That is, in the interest.
Someone said, I just noticed the music, and that's because you're conditioned into seeing fucking cops like in a potentially what looks like a high-speed chase with the Animal Come music playing in the background, no matter what happens.
Of justice, and we're going to do that.
Trump Jr. Is speaking about what has happened and today and the history that it is making. I want to play a quick bite from that.
There's no ambulance because he's no longer the president, chat. Everybody knows.
This is the end result of liberals.
Oh God, he looks like shit.
Damn, this guy's good.